Welcome to CBT Nuggets Mastering VMware vSphere version 5. I'm Greg Shields. Let me guess what's probably going on right now. Maybe you were sitting around working with your group policy, maybe swapping out a network card, or just doing whatever it is that's involved with the tasks of IT, and someone walks up to your desk and slaps down some CDs or DVDs for a new piece of software called VMware vSphere. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're being elevated from the good old traditional IT world of physical computers and servers and desktops, and you're being asked to quickly become educated and quickly evolve into this whole world of virtualization. You've probably spent some time looking at virtualization. I mean, you're probably familiar with it. You can't read anywhere in the IT press these days without coming across an article or two on virtualization itself. But really getting down into the click by click of how you would design and construct and operate and make sure that that whole virtualization environment stays running over the extended period of time, well, that may not be something that necessarily you have a lot of experience with. And so consequently, you've decided, I'm going to go learn this thing. Well, I'm glad you have. As I mentioned, my name is Greg Shields, and I've been working with virtualization since its very beginnings. And I have the unique opportunity to once again put together a video training series here with CBT Nuggets to assist you with mastering this new technology that we think of as VMware vSphere. I put together 20 of these different nuggets where essentially you and I are going to spend some time going through that whole design, build, and operate activity as it relates to vSphere. And I hope that over the extended period of time that I can spend some time helping you understand how to make good decisions whenever you do this in production. And also, if you plan on taking that VCP examination, well, how to be successful on that VCP examination. In this series, we're going to spend some time talking about a whole series of topics. Right? I want you to help, first and foremost, I want you to understand really why virtualization has really gone from this amazing, cool thing that no one really understands to just something that you do. Virtualization's rapid dominance at the data center has occurred over an extremely fast period of time. It wasn't that many years ago when all of our servers were physical boxes and we were marching into the data center to make any changes to them. But the incorporation and the embrace of virtualization almost universally across IT organizations is a testament to just the benefits that it can provide to both you as an IT person and also as your business as someone needing to accomplish something with the benefits of computing. So this series attempts to kind of solve two things. First and foremost, it tends to help you understand how to build, configure, operate vSphere. By the end of this, you're going to hopefully understand all of the different, the real vagaries associated with working with vSphere and the buttons you need to click and all that sort of click here, then click here sort of stuff that's required to put a vCenter environment up in operations. Now, the second piece of this is also understanding, hopefully from myself, just the things that I have learned over the years that I can hopefully impart to you that are good decisions, right? Good ways to implement things, best practices for implementing vSphere. Because vSphere there are a lot of moving parts, and you can connect those moving parts in a lot of incorrect ways, and there are only a few really correct ways that will ensure that you are successful both in the short run as your environment grows over time. So I hope to be able to kind of share with you what I've learned over the years and help you be successful there. And then thirdly also is prepping for that all-important VCP exam. Now, the VMware Certified Professional exam is a certification exam, obviously from VMware. It's a single exam. I would highly recommend dropping by VMware.com and picking up the VCP5 exam blueprint. Now, the exam blueprint, excellent document, an excellent piece of work. VMware has done a really good job of outlining step by step and task by task all the things that you've got to know in order to be able to take that exam. And, if you're not interested in the exam, if taking that exam is not something that is going to be useful for you or your career, don't worry, because the focus here is not necessarily specifically getting you ready for those questions. The focus here is helping you understand what virtualization is and how it works best with vSphere. But along the way, I may make mention from time to time where certain elements are just good to know because they tend to be noted on the exam. They tend to be exam type things. And so if you are intending on taking that exam, take a look at that VCP exam blueprint down there. It's on VMware.com. It's in their education certification location where you can learn very specifically what you need to know. You will find that the items in that blueprint, so the breakdown structure of all the knowledge that you need to know, I've kind of taken the information from that document, refactored it into a slightly better storyline, but you'll see kind of the same actions found here in this training series that you kind of will see inside of the blueprint. And part of that's purposeful because the exam intends to validate that you know what you need to know. But in order to get there, you've probably got to know those things also. And so kind of generally aligning how you will construct your vSphere environment according to that blueprint in a lot of ways assists you down solving both of those goals. Now the first thing I really want to talk about here, and we're not actually going to get into the click by click until we get to nugget number 3. Because before you actually even start putting bits into disks, you got to understand really what the role of virtualization is in the data center and also what the role of vSphere is in and amongst everything. And recognizing virtualization's really rapid dominance of the data center is an important understanding for, in many ways, sort of justifying your move towards virtualization. I'd say often that virtualization has very, very rapidly gone from a really cool thing. Right? There was a time period not that many years ago where virtualization was the hottest thing coming and going. And in a very short period of time, it went from a really exciting thing to just kind of something you do. And so today, I'm filming this somewhere near the end of 2011. So in this time period, a very large, if not almost majority of all IT workloads these days are being run inside of a virtual environment. IT has subscribed to virtualization because virtualization presents some very important benefits, such as compression, consolidation, efficiency, optimization. You know, for most environments, for most businesses, the number one reason why we move to virtualization is just simply because, well, I have 50 servers, and all of those servers are running at 5% utilization, and it's a huge waste of power and a huge waste of space. So if I squish those 50 servers down so I can fit 10 servers onto one server, well, then I just have less stuff that I have to manage in the physical world. Right? The less I have to manage means the less to power, less to cool, just less to deal with. Now there's a further benefit there too. I mean, not just the space, power, and cooling reduction bits, but the other bit there is the fact that a virtual server is just so much faster to get deployed. If I ask you the question today, okay, and I am, so how long does it take between the time somebody walks into your office and says, hey, we need a new server, and when that server is actually in the rack and producing whatever service they need? Right? So if somebody walks in and says, look, we need another SQL server today, how long does it take? I mean, can you do that in a day? Can you do it in 5 days? Some people commonly, honestly, the most common answer I get out of people when I ask them that question is, well, it takes me about a month, right? Does it take you a month? I mean, if somebody comes into your office today and says, I need a new server, could it take 30 days to get a new server? Possibly. Think about that, right? You need a new server, and so you've got to go spec one out, and then you've got to go call Dell or IBM or HP or whoever handles your servers. You've got to tell them what you want. They've got to build it. They've got to ship it to you. You've got to unbox it. You've got to find space in the rack. You've got to put it in the rack and network it and connect it to storage and add an operating system and then put on whatever applications are required. And there's probably 9 levels of process and change control that you've got to go through in order to do that. So the time difference between a new service request and a new service these days is honestly measured in a month or more. It's measured in weeks. Well, when you move to virtualization, virtualization says, all right, what if I just have a bunch of equipment that is available and that creates an amount of supply? So a certain supply of resources that I can then apply to virtual machines. And I can then rapidly deploy new virtual machines when that service request comes in. As you'll find out a little later on, with the right technologies in place, you can create very nice templates and then clone a VM from a template so that you know you have a configuration controlled VM right from the get-go. And if you have enough resource supply, if you have enough CPU and memory and network and storage, well, you're going to be able to provision that virtual machine, and you'll have that virtual machine up in minutes or hours instead of a month. That's great. That's a great thing for management. That's a great thing for reducing the drag that IT places on business agility. I know those are businessy kinds of topics, but every time that your business comes to you and they have to plan a month ahead of time for those sorts of things, well, that's not a great deal. Also, virtualization, when you implement the right functions, right, when you implement the right protective measures that come with virtualization, you also reduce the risk of server failure. Now, depending on what level of protections you want to put in place, the server itself might fail, right? VMware's HA, if I lose a host, I'm going to lose that virtual machine, but I'm going to lose it for, I don't know, 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the most, before it automatically powers on somewhere else. When was the last time you were out at a barbecue? And it's a Saturday afternoon, maybe you've had a beer or two, you're cooking up steaks and your pager goes off because one of your servers has failed. Well, how many minutes does it take for you to get that server back online and running again? You might have to put down the barbecue tongs and get in your car and drive to work. And if you're living on the other side of town, well, there could be traffic. So it could take a really long period of time to get that server back up and operational again. So just the sheer operational issues associated with server failure and applying HA to that or DRS or even fault tolerance to that really reduces the amount of downtime that a server is going to have whenever actual downtime occurs. So virtualization in and of itself really improves the availability of services. And it also means that you can perhaps you can stay at the barbecue instead of having to drive into work. It also allows you to optimize the use of those expensive physical resources. Right? I think I mentioned that, I don't know, the average utilization of a Windows server industry-wide, I have been told, is somewhere in like 5 to 7% worldwide. So you go to any Windows server, and 93 to 95% of the time, that Windows server is just idly flipping ones and zeros back and forth to keep itself busy until it needs to actually do something. And I don't know, if you're a manager and you have a person, an employee that's only working 7% of the time, what are you going to do with that employee? Well, you're probably going to either give them more work or tell them that they need to go find another job. But why do we do this with our servers? It's expensive. They're very expensive. And then running them with power and cooling is even more expensive. So squishing together those unused processor cycles across many servers allows us to have a more optimized use of those expensive physical resources. Virtualization in and of itself means that I'm getting more out of the stuff that I paid for, and that's great. A real big benefit here, too, is this whole notion of disaster recovery and making disaster recovery finally cost-effective. I have a buddy of mine who was working in a financial services organization. And this is back in the way old days, prior to virtualization. And because they were financial services, they had to have a disaster recovery site because of, it's people's money. And the way that they did a disaster recovery site is when he went to go build a server, then he would go build another server, and he would drive the other server over to the other data center. And if he had to make a change on the first one, he would have to drive over to the other data center and make a change on the second one. Really not cost effective as a disaster recovery scenario. Now with virtualization, however, I have the ability to encapsulate all the configurations that is a virtual machine down to just one single file. Right? A virtual disk is a virtual disk, and it's one file large. So with that virtual disk in my hands, I can then replicate the contents of that virtual disk from one place to another. And so it creates this really cost-effective sense of disaster recovery. It's not, I don't know, it's not hard to do disaster recovery again. It's still challenging. But the whole driving servers around problem just really isn't there anymore. So disaster recovery, much, much easier in virtualization because, well, we've now got the automation functions that distill all the way down even to SMB. I mean, even SMBs can do disaster recovery these days with virtualization very, very, very easily. And lastly, is really helping you come to grips with this impending notion of cloud computing. Right now, today, at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, there are a lot of people still afraid of cloud computing, and it's understandable. It's a very, shattering, it's a very disruptive technology. A lot of people wondering where it fits. And whereas virtualization and cloud computing are by no means the same thing, the embrace of one begins to lead one into the embrace of the other. So becoming familiar with vSphere is a good educational point for your resume, for your taking the test, for your just the wisdom that you can apply to your entire to the contribution that you provide for your company. And that's a good thing. Becoming more valuable to your company is really important. And so there's no better way to do it these days, it seems, than by becoming really, really familiar with virtualizations, and especially advanced virtualizations topics. Now, before we even get started, right, before you actually even start watching, working with me in these videos and learning together with me, there are a couple things you have to know. And luckily they're not that bad. Couple of prerequisites for this series. Number one is just an understanding of the Windows OS. If you've been working with the Windows OS for really any period of time, you are familiar with it, great. Also, no fear of Linux. Whereas in vSphere version 4 and 4.1, and particularly now in vSphere version 5, the number of things that you have to do that make you resort back to the old Linux OS stuff, in the Linux UI, which is command line, getting less and less. In fact, in version 5, there is no ESX anymore. There's only ESXi. And ESXi is a very, 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 very stripped down, almost appliance-like version of Linux. Some people don't like it when you call ESXi Linux, but it still runs off of it has a management partition there that runs off of a highly tailored version of BusyBox Linux. You can drill into that Linux if you want, and you can play around with that Linux, but I will tell you that in this series, I'm actually going to spend almost no time in the Linux UI. But having no fear of it, at least having some comfort level with it, will assist. There are some commands that you probably should at least be aware of. If you're going to take the exam, it is commonly asked for you to understand what the Linux commands are. But just having no fear of the Linux OS, even if you don't have experience, just no fear is important here. I also ask that you have a basic knowledge of virtualization concept and also networking storage. It's not necessary that if you had extensive knowledge of virtualization, you probably wouldn't be watching this series. But simply having an understanding that virtualization involves a hypervisor and that there are virtual machines that sit on top of that hypervisor, and they're all sort of atomic and they're all isolated from each other. Just a basic knowledge of what virtualization is important, because I'm going to just jump right into how to use vSphere right around nugget number 3. Same thing with networking storage, basic knowledge of how to configure networking. There's a couple of advanced networking things you're going to need to know. Many of the, same thing with storage, but many of those you can ask questions of your network admin or your storage admin as it relates. I'll show you what these things are, so don't worry about them if you're not completely familiar. The hardest part, honestly, when it comes to networking storage is if you're the type of admin that has been working exclusively with direct attached storage and where a network person hands you a cable and that you just IP a server. When you get to virtualization, the whole networking and storage conversation gets a little bit more complicated because you're creating an infrastructure. And it's in many ways the same kind of infrastructure that the network admins and storage admins have kind of been providing for you for a long period of time. So at the conclusion of this, I think you're going to understand vSphere and you're going to understand virtualization better, but you're probably also going to understand virtualization a little better too, or excuse me, networking a little better too. Same thing with storage. And so there's benefits here to taking this, to learning here, because you're going to learn quite a few topics, I think, over these next 20 videos. You should also have a familiarity with the VMware Workstation product. Okay, so the entire infrastructure that I'm building here and going to be working with you on is based off of VMware Workstation. So the term that you would Google on is called nested virtualization. And nested virtualization, what it really means is that I have a hypervisor, which in our case is VMware Workstation, that's sitting on top of my Windows computer that I'm looking at right here. So VMware Workstation provides a hypervisor, and then the virtual machine that we create is ESXi. And inside ESXi, once we've created that, we'll put more virtual machines. So we're nesting. It's like the Russian dolls that they keep going in and they keep getting smaller and smaller. This nested virtualization is, I am purposely doing it in this way because not a lot of people have access to a server with which to install ESXi directly onto. But you can install it inside a workstation. A workstation, you can download a free demo or a free eval version, or you can buy it. It's not that expensive. It's completely worth the money spent on it. So be familiar with it. Spend a minute or two just playing around with creating a VM or two, because that will assist you with what we're doing when we're creating this nested virtualization thing. And then most importantly too is a desire to learn. I say this during all of my training, is this is going to be a lot of fun. And I highly recommend that you follow along. Create your own environment at the same time you're watching me create this environment, because we learn by doing. And if we can interact, so you can listen to me, I can hopefully answer the questions that you're thinking at the time that you're thinking them, and also that you can just simply do what I'm doing over here. This will help you actually really cement this knowledge into your head. It's very important. Now down here at the bottom in the box is, I have copied and pasted this right out of that VCP guide, the VCP blueprint. And I do this specifically because this is what VMware suggests as the minimum prerequisites for a candidate for the VCP examination, or VCP certification. You'll see here a candidate for the certification has about 6 months of experience working with vSphere. Okay, you've been working with vSphere for about 6 months. That's around the time that you might want to begin taking the test. These are typically infrastructure personnel, so you're working on foundations, capable of installing, configuring ESXi hosts, using vCenter Server to monitor, manage, troubleshoot, administer virtual machines. So not a lot of design stuff. There actually is a design certification over the top of the VCP, but this is the entry-level certification that just validates that yes, you have proven that you are competent in managing vCenter. Further, it says that the successful candidate will most likely have additional industry-recognized general IT certifications or equivalent experience. Having an MCITP can't hurt. In some cases, having one of the Linux certs can't hurt. Having a networking cert can't hurt. Having a storage cert can't hurt. But the VCP is really intended to be an introductory level certification. It's the first step on the path. Now, how to get there? What's the steps we're going to go through in order to get to this nirvana of VMware bliss, whatever? You'll find that, and it's funny because everybody always wants to get to working with virtual machines first, or it's like, hey, let's start working on a DRS load balancing cluster. That's what I want to see. But what's interesting is, again, you are building an infrastructure here, and that infrastructure has to be cemented correctly. You've got to put the rebar in before you can put the concrete in, and you've got to put the concrete in before you can put in the carpets and the windows. And so we have to start by essentially digging the hole that we're going to put the foundation in before we can even get to the rebar. This is how I've kind of constructed this outline for us. We're going to start here with a couple of just intro concepts here. This nugget is, as you are currently experiencing, just what the heck is VMware? What the heck is vSphere? And what is the VCP5? Then the next one, I'm going to spend just a minute or two, not that long, helping you understand what the vSphere architecture and its solutions are. I find that most people kind of get the architecture after they have kind of played with all the pieces first. So this will not be a very long nugget, but I just want to give you a feel for what VMware is thinking when they're creating this vCenter thing. We are then going to install vCenter Server and then ESXi. So ESXi is the hypervisor. Okay, that's the thing that does the virtualizing. You're going to put ESXi on one or more, hopefully more, physical hosts in your data center. The more hosts you put it on, the more VMs you can manage. And then one of those VMs will be a VM running Windows that runs vCenter Server. Simple enough. Now, vCenter Server is it's essentially the management tool. It's the management platform that enables you to interact with your hypervisors, your ESXi hosts, and then also all the VMs that you're running. You can connect vCenter Server directly into a single ESXi box, or you can connect it to a set of them, which is the preferred configuration, so you can operate all of them as a unified infrastructure. And that's how we're going to do it. Today, even though you can plug it directly into an ESXi box, these days, people just want to run 3 or 4 or 6 or 32 ESXi hosts in one big cluster and then allow themselves to abstract the resources of those machines for use by virtual machines. Once we've built the operating system, okay, once we've got a Windows box running vCenter Server, and once we've got a couple of hypervisors up and running, we're going to start working on the network stuff and the storage stuff and the data store stuff. So we got to get the networking up so that we can get the storage up, and then we got to get the storage up in order to get the data stores up. And I'm going to focus on Ethernet-based storage pretty strongly here, just simply because our industry is moving very much so towards Ethernet-based storage, whether that be iSCSI or fiber channel over Ethernet. It's just the industry seems to be moving in that direction. And also because if you are a fiber channel shop and you have real fiber channel HBAs in the back of your hosts, of which there are still very many of you, for the most part, that configuration, the majority of the work is done by the storage admin, and you just sort of receive one or more LUNs. Right? You light the thing up, and all of a sudden, poof, LUNs just appear. So there's not that much to do comparatively from the ESX side or the vCenter side as it relates to storage in a pure fiber channel shop. Now, Ethernet-based storage, fiber channel or iSCSI, you did a little bit more work to do. You've got to do some IP addressing in certain circumstances. You've got to do some failover stuff in certain circumstances. So that's why we're going to spend most of the focus on that with the switches and the storage, and then ultimately the data stores. Then and only then, at nugget number 8, can we actually start working with virtual machines. And so we're going to work with virtual machines, we're going to create them, we're going to administer and migrate them. This is the vMotion topic. And then we're going to get into the very, very cool topic of VMware clusters. This is, you are both welcome and I am sorry, the longest of the videos in the series, because VMware clusters are both just really awesomely cool, and also there's just a lot there that you need to know. So that one is one that you may want to watch a few times, because there's a lot of content in there, and it's really, really, really important. We then go through rapid deployment with cloning and templates. And then from here down, we're going to go through some of the individual topics that are absolutely required for running your environment. But the build of your environment starts here and goes to about right here at number 11. And at this point, these are kind of they're kind of branching from there. You have to do backup and restore. You probably should update your hosts and profile them. You'll probably want to move to distributed switches at some time. You're probably going to want to implement security. So all of these are the additional topics all the way down to the bottom, which sort of conclude the some body of knowledge that's necessary for you to be successful with vCenter. Now, if you are planning on taking the exam, as I said before, you probably are going to want to follow along. So we are going to be creating a network somewhat similar to this. We will have one domain controller, dc.company.pri. We will have one vCenter server that is actually running as a virtual machine called vc.company.pri. And we will have two, and then at some point later on, three ESX hosts, ESX1, 2, and then later on number 3. All of the hosts have local storage, and all of the hosts will ultimately connect into a single instance of shared storage as well. So what should you have if you had a desktop computer with about 8 gigs of RAM and at least 2 processors, if not more, probably 4 would be even better. You will probably be able to support all the needs for this if you want to demo this. But this is what we're going to be creating. I would also recommend going to VMware's website and downloading the whatever bits are necessary. I think you get like a 60-day time bomb on all of the bits. Just to give you a view of what we're going to look at, this is the server that we'll be playing with. This is vc.company.pri. Currently we have, looks like 3 hosts, 6 processors, 1 cluster, 7 data stores, 6 virtual machines and templates that are created. Here's all the stuff over here at the right. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to get a chance to see all kinds of stuff here and interact with vCenter in all sorts of ways that will just be impressive, and will prepare you just for doing this in operations. If you do plan on taking the exam, though, there are a couple of ideas here about the exam, a couple of thoughts. As I mentioned, this is the first level exam in the certification portfolio, so this is step 1. Then from there, there is 2 advanced level certifications, the VCAP DCA and VCAP DCT. Or, oops, that's a typo. That should be DCD. The VCAP DCA is the kind of second level certification there for administrators, okay, for administration, whereas the DCD is for design. So if you're interested in creating data centers, virtual data centers, then the DCD makes more sense. If you're interested in operating them, DCA. And then the design expert, VCDX here, is the expert level certification. Not a lot of VCDXs in the world, but there are a few. There are also a few desktop virtualization 2 certifications. These are if it's not server virtualization you're so much interested in, but desktop virtualization. These are the sort of expert level certifications for that. A few exam stats here. It is a single test to pass the VCP. 85 questions, 90 minutes if you are not English as a primary language. If English is your secondary language, you get 30 more minutes in certain countries. Multiple choice, there are some exhibits. It is a scaled scoring method, somewhere between 100 and 500. You need 300 to pass. Okay, standard certification tests. You go to one of those certification testing facilities. You sit down, you take the test. 90 minutes later, you know if you passed or not. One interesting thing, and this is kind of the gotcha with the VCP, is that VMware still today, whether you agree with it or not, requires you to take a VMware official course, one of the 2 prior to taking the exam. It can be the VMware vSphere Install, Configure, Manage, or the VMware vSphere What's New exam in certain circumstances. But you have to take that course and give them money in order to be given the certification. Even if you pass the exam, you still have to go back and take the course, or they will not give you the certification. I will leave that for whether you believe that's a good idea or not. The VCP5 hosted by Pearson is actually the exam name and number. So this series will assist you with all the steps you need to do to be successful with virtualization. It will attempt to also prepare you for the exam. Again, there is that course requirement. But mostly, really, I'm looking forward to another 19 of these little nuggets, which will assist you with this whole process of elevating your knowledge set to today's most modern virtualization platform in VMware vSphere. But more than anything, really, the goal of this, at least for me, is to help you develop your knowledge set, to expand your knowledge set, to include one of the world's most mature platforms in VMware vSphere version 5. This is almost brand new technology, but at the same time, it's 5 revs in. So we're talking about a technology that at this point really kind of getting to be fairly mature. I mean, this stuff is bomb-proof. And I've argued many times before that in some cases, the weakest link in a vSphere environment is the administrator who doesn't know that they're not supposed to click that button. So don't be that administrator. I look forward to spending the next 20 nuggets with you, helping you become more educated, helping you become that much wiser an administrator as it relates to VMware vSphere 5. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.